His bid to defend the Winston Cup he won last year fell short. But this Fenton, Missouri native scored victories at Charlotte at the Coca-Cola 600 and at Sears Point in the Banquet Foods 300 to go with 7 other top 5 finishes this season. For his 1991 challenge for the Winston Cup, he has formed his own race team and in an effort to economize, hired the least expensive driver he could find, himself. Ladies and gentlemen, driver of the Raymond Beadle-owned Miller Pontiacs, the 1989 Winston Cup champion, Rusty Wallace. In his first season in Bud Moore's Motorcraft Thunderbirds, this driver posted 11 consecutive top 10 finishes at the beginning of the season to take command of the Winston Cup point standing. He finished second at Atlanta. And at Charlotte. With third place finishes in Martinsville. And Phoenix. His perseverance was rewarded at the Atlanta Journal 500 with a season-ending victory. Ladies and gentlemen, from Conover, North Carolina, the 5th place finisher in this year's Winston Cup standings, Morgan Shepherd. During the second half of the season, the Coors Thunderbirds from Georgia were the cars to contend with every week on the Winston Cup Tour. The mid-season surge put together by Harry Melling's crew, headed by Mike Beam, brought the team from 9th place to 4th in the final Winston Cup standings. There was the victory at Dover, following second at Charlotte, Pocono, and Talladega, confirming that this team is back and ready to challenge in 1991. Ladies and gentlemen, from Dawsonville, Georgia, the 1988 Winston Cup champion, Bill Elliott. This driver, in his first year with Junior Johnson's Budweiser Ford, scored 3 victories. A win at Martinsville, a win at Pocono, and a second win at Martinsville to go with 2 pole positions and 8 other top 5 finishes. He battled with Bill Elliott during the final third of the season for Winston Cup points and took the 3rd place in the Winston Cup standing. Along with brother Brett, they joined the Flocks and the Allisons as the only brothers to ever win back-to-back races in Winston Cup competition. Ladies and gentlemen, from Chemung, New York, Geoff Bodine. Bristol, Sears Point, Richmond, and at Dover, as well as 3rd places at Talladega, Charlotte, Bristol, and Martinsville. He led the point standings until the next to last race of the season, before losing the Winston Cup title to Dale Earnhardt in the final race of the year. Ladies and gentlemen, the 2nd place finisher for this year's Winston Cup title, driver of the Folgers Thunderbirds, Mark Martin. Earnhardt and his team made a pact for 1990. They would fight and scrap for every point during the season. They would treat every race like it was the one that would decide the Winston Cup Championship. Obstacles were waiting for them along the route to this year's Winston Cup. They won the Daytona 499, but lost the Daytona 500, the first of early season disappointments. At the Pontiac 400 at Richmond, Earnhardt and Mark Martin provided a taste of the battle to come as Earnhardt finished second to Martin. The Goodwrench 500 at Rockingham was a race Dale wanted to win for his sponsors, but a problem with the ratchet in the car left him 10th, 3 laps behind. This year, the man they call the Intimidator became the Dominator, running at the front nearly twice as much as his leading competitors. At the Motorcraft 500, he started from the pole, dominated the race, and then swept past Morgan Shepherd on the final restart to post his first victory of the season. Solidly in the Winston Cup point lead, Earnhardt headed for another of his favorite tracks, Darlington. When the dust had settled, it was Earnhardt winning his second straight race, beating the ever-present Martin by just 0.3 of a second. Bristol loomed and Earnhardt's team arrived looking for victory number 3. It wasn't to come. Earnhardt struggled to the finish line with wreck damage 5 laps behind. Dale had a solid run at the short track in the Brushy Mountains of North Carolina, finished third behind Geoff Bodine and Darrell Waltrip. At Martinsville, early problems cost the team a lap, but the 5th place finish kept Dale in the point lead. A return to the big tracks meant a return to victory for the Goodwrench team. Dale and his team showed their prowess on the super speedways, outrunning the field to win the Winston 500. Then it was off to Charlotte. With his hometown fans watching, Dale became the first driver to win the Winston twice in his 6-year history. The win was worth $325,000, the largest single race payoff in NASCAR history. The following week, however, the team underwent his first championship test. A problem in the Coca-Cola 600 sent Dale into the first turn wall, and the crew started scrambling. The frame of the Lumina was bent so badly, the crew chained it to the garage post and pulled it with a wrecker to straighten it enough to get back into the fray. A 30th place finish resulted. At Dover, the Monster Mile took its toll. A camshaft failed in the engine. The crew pulled the engine from the car, made major repairs, and returned to the race until the engine finally gave up. They finished 31st and fell from the Winston Cup point lead for the first time since Richmond. A transmission failure in Sears Point, repaired in just 20 minutes, and problems at Pocono temporarily forced Dale and his team out of top 10 finishes as his point standing fell to an all-time low of 4th place. With their backs to the wall, the Goodwrench team squared its shoulders and began the run that would lead them to Atlanta. At Michigan, Earnhardt put his Lumina in victory lane, beating Ernie Irvan by little more than a car length. In the Pepsi 400 at Daytona, he vaulted back into 2nd place in the point standings with a 1-second victory over Alan Kulwicki. At Talladega, the season came into focus when Dale won the pole and then the race, beating Bill Elliott by 2 car lengths, narrowing the spread to a single point between himself and Mark Martin as the teams headed for Watkins Glen. Dale then surprised everyone, including himself, by winning the pole at the Glen's famed road course. Despite a tango with Rusty Wallace, Earnhardt finished 7th in the race. Then Dale scored twin 8th-place finishes at Michigan and Bristol, and a season that had opened with such high hope began to fade away. With the final third of the season left to run, Dale was 61 points behind, and Mark was looking very strong and consistent. However, at the Heinz Southern 500 at Darlington, Dale and his crew were once again at their dominating best, beating Ernie Irvan by more than 4 seconds. The next week, he and Mark Martin staged their own race, battling for victory. The Chevrolet beat the Ford by less than a half second, and the point margin was down to 16. At Dover, Earnhardt was a strong 3rd. At Martinsville, he finished 2nd behind Geoff Bodine. At North Wilkesboro, he and Mark battled again, this time with the Ford emerging the winner by just over 3 seconds. The point margin was still 16 points with 4 races to go. With the heat on high, Charlotte loomed, and once again, Dale was unable to get a victory at the track located just 8 miles from his hometown. Still running after the scrape with the wall, Dale held on and finished 30th. After a 10th place finish in Rockingham, and with only 2 races remaining, Dale and his team headed for the sand and cactus of Arizona. And like earlier in the season, the team displayed its championship talent by responding at the most critical time of the season. Earnhardt and his black Chevrolet left his opponents in the dust. Leading the last 273 laps of the 312-lap race, he posted a spectacular 6-car length victory over Kenny Schrader. At Atlanta, the entire season was on the line. Dale merely had to finish ahead of Martin to claim the title, while Martin had to beat Dale by 2 positions if he was to claim his first Winston Cup. Sunday morning, both combatants were ready. The talk was over. And in championship style, Earnhardt took his Lumina to the front and then eased home in 3rd place to claim his 4th career Winston Cup and reward car owner Richard Childress and his team with their 3rd championship in the last 5 years. Now he stands second only to Richard Petty's record 7 championships. He has become the all-time leading money winner in any form of motorsport, with more than $12 million in race winnings. Ladies and gentlemen, the 1990 Winston Cup team. Engine builder, Eddie Lanier. Crew chief, Kurt Shelmerdine. Car owner, Richard Childress. And the man in black himself, racing leading money winner and 1990 Winston Cup champion, Dale Earnhardt.